this is Yolanda Vanveen from vanveenbulbs.com. In this segment, we're going to learn some tips on small container gardening. Now, small container gardening is such a fun way to garden because you don't need to have 2 acres. You don't even need to own your own house. All you need is a window in the house or on a sunny deck. And you too can have your own container garden. So there's a few tips that I'd like to share that make life a little bit easier with container gardening. Now there's all types of plants that do well in containers. This is a mandevilla or mandevilla plant, and it's a vine. So if you've got anything that's viney, make sure and give it something to grab onto. This is just a metal trellis, and they're really fun to shop for. So my tip number 1 is don't be worried about putting vines or taller plants or plants that might fall over in containers, because you can always give them something to grab onto. Another tip that I found too is you don't have to just use soil or bark dust. Rocks are great for small container gardens, and I love to collect rocks when I go to the beach or go to the river, and it's a great way to show the rocks off. So I always add a few rocks to my containers to just make them look a little nicer. This is one of my favorite container plants. It's a Cleopatra Canna, and no 2 are the same. I love the colors, I love the shapes. Hummingbirds really love this plant. And so my tip number 2 is to pick plants that you love. So when you're out and about in someone else's garden, or you go to the garden center or farmer's market and you see something you like, plant it in a container, because every plant will do well in a container. And this particular plant's a sun plant. But if you don't have sun, there's lots of shade plants that you can grow as well. So my next tip is to make sure that you get all types of plants together even in one pot, so you have blooms at different times. Now, as you can see, this one's already has some blooms that are dying out. So what my rule of thumb is, if it looks good, leave it alone. If it's brown or looks tacky in any way, cut it out. So even the tips of leaves, or if things don't look quite perfect, I will just go through and just cut it out. Because it seems like the more that I cut things out of my container gardens, the more room they have for new things to grow. So in this pot, I've done what they call lasagna layering. So I've put some larger bulbs towards the middle and then some smaller bulbs to the top of the pot, and that way I have all different kinds of flowers blooming in succession in my container garden, and it makes it really easy. So my final tip is to make sure in your container gardens, because they're small, they can't hold a lot of water, so water them in the heat of the summer at night. Everybody says to water them in the morning hours, but I found in my container gardens there's just not enough time for them to soak up all the water and to stay hydrated for the next day. So I really soak my containers at least once to twice a week when it's hot out. And when it's not so hot out, I don't water them hardly at all. And in the wintertime, the trick is to make sure and keep these guys dry. And a lot of them won't survive the winter, so I'm going to throw them in my greenhouse. And the others that will survive the winter, I just cut the greens down when they turn brown, and I throw them under the eaves of my house or around the deck. And then I throw them back outside in the hottest, sunniest area with lots of rain coming down in where rain can hit them in about April or May. And they do well from year to year. And it makes it really quite easy.